Hello, hello. Welcome to Healthy Perspectives, a podcast that takes on current cultural and social issues through a clinical lens. Hello, hello. All right. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, we appreciate your time. Without further ado, want to first a little shout out to you. Thank you so much for listening. This matters to us around here. We from the beginning of this journey into podcasting, our goal at Healthy Perspectives has been and will remain. We want to take a look at cultural, social, psychological issues based on current topics. And that means we've had to, over the last couple of years, really address some hard things. And many of you, I've noticed, are you're sticking around for the journey. You keep coming back, and we just really appreciate that. So thank you so much. I know we're not the easiest ones in the world to find, but many of you have found us. So for those of you who are sharing and all of that kind of stuff out there, thank you for doing that and getting this information to people. Because again, our goal is to help people think through things, process stuff, and essentially be more intentional with their life, hopefully making them better. So thank you. Today we're going to address narrative flips, or in the clinical world, what we describe incongruence. So our tip of the day today is incongruence destroys trust. Trust, for those of you who followed us for a while, you know that the way we define trust here at Healthy Perspectives is truth, authenticity, and transparency, because that's what builds trust. You want to build trust, truth, authenticity, and transparency. You want to destroy trust, you're going to have lies, secrets, and deceptions. So incongruence is how we lie. And I'll explain more of that as we proceed. If you are not following on Rumble, YouTube videos, the video sections for today, you're going to hear stuff, but it is not going to be the easiest in the world to probably follow. I encourage you to do it anyway, because there's going to be benefit in here. But I am going to be sharing a lot of video content today. And I'm doing it because there's a whole plethora of things going on in the world. With the incongruence that destroys trust, I want to start you off with a massive narrative flip that we've been addressing in our culture in the last few days. We have had this big bump of Teslas being lit on fire, destroyed. And I'm going to start with the absolute most succinct video that I've found on this yet. So take a look at this.
Okay, but seriously, like, liberals went from mandating electric vehicles to setting them on fire, and they wonder why no one takes them seriously.
For those of you who are following along, you got to see there was a lady who, and I don't know who she was, shout out to her. She was on TikTok, and she came on and she just basically laid it out that there's this huge incongruence. Before, you were saying, yes, EVs, let's go EVs. Now you're lighting them on fire, which, by the way, is terrible for our environment, right? EVs because we want to save the environment, but let's light them on fire and destroy the environment. That, my friends, is a narrative flip or an incongruence of absolute monumental proportions. But it doesn't stop there, folks. Let's take a look. When I saw that, I'm like, okay, well, what exactly has this come out of? Like, where did this all come from? Well, it was really easy. I did a basic Google search, the EV law, the 2030 law, and I found out that in California, 68% of new cars sold in the state will be zero emissions, electric vehicles. with 100% by 2035. That's the law in California. That's a big deal. That shows the incongruence. But don't stop there. Take a look at the images and listen to these people talk about these cars being lit on fire. I got a couple of examples coming for you. Okay.
Targeted attack on a Tesla repair center in Las Vegas. This dramatic video showing multiple cars in flames. According to authorities, the suspected arson occurred early this morning. When police arrived, they found 5 vehicles set on fire or damaged, and the word resist spray painted on the front of the business.
Folks, do you see this? That incongruence is crazy. The narrative flip, right? And look, I don't expect that people are going to be perfect, but the more consistent we can be in our presentation, the better off we're going to be. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to stay on the Tesla thing for right now, because this is a big deal. This is a really big deal. This is, a lot of people out of anger, breaking their own moral codes that they've stated, right? That's why it's incongruent. That's why it's a narrative flip. We believe in clean air and clean water and clean. And then they come along and they burn things that are going to create massive amounts of damage. Just absolute massive, right? And that's a problem. That's a really big incongruence. So let's take a look at this one more. Hold on just a second. It's going to take me a moment. I apologize for this. I'm having one of those moments. It happens from time to time, but I'm going to set the stage with this. There's a gentleman. I don't know if he's a gentleman or just an a-hole or just a nice guy or whatever, but some dude, his name's Will Lockett. I don't know who he is. He claims that he is an independent journalist. Okay. And I found him actually reading an article. And so then I looked him up on X, because, there's a lot of people on X, and I found him. And so I'm going to set the stage with his own words. All right. For those of you following along, you can see this guy named Will Lockett. I'm near the beginning of his first page. Right. So, if you went to his page, you'd see this. He says, these recent fires are so destructive. This was in July of 2024. So he's probably gotten off X. My guess is because he's not actually an independent journalist, but that's probably a little bit of assumptive of me. But in July of 2024, which is not that long ago, less than a year, these fires are so destructive that over a month of June, they pumped 6.8 million tons of planet-wrecking carbon into the atmosphere. Now, he was talking about like wildfires and stuff, it sounds like. But if you go down a couple more, in the past, wildfires were a rarity in Boreal, as it is frigid temperatures and abundant ice quench any sparks instantly. Meaning what? That it's gotten worse. And, the one right above it, but the hotter, drier weather of recent years has rendered this majestic environment into kindling. Now, why do I set the stage with all of that? Because this so-called independent journalist, he says it right here, covering global politics, climate change, and technology, decides he's going to come out with some information. Now, let's take a look at congruence. Cares about the environment, right? But let's see if he really cares about the environment, because let's be real. If you're an environmentalist, you ought to not just care about the natural environment outside of humans, but the humans are natural. So you should care about humans too, right? Tesla is dying and Polestar wants to kill it. He starts off as an independent journalist saying, Musk is killing Tesla. His lack of integrity, lack of internal consistency, and deeply fascistic leanings are now on full display for the world to see. And the world has responded by violently throwing up in their mouths. Tesla sales in the EU are down 45% and so da, 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 da. I mean, does this sound like an independent journalist? No, it does not. So this is what we call incongruence. It's a narrative flip. I care about these things. Well, let's look at this other article. By the way, these all came out in the last week or two. These two articles, and they're both by him. This is that same guy. I happened to come across both of them. I wasn't searching for him. This is what Drudge pushed to the forefront, which means Drudge is, not an unbiased, a place to get information, but whatever. Will says, it's fair to say that Tesla isn't doing so well. Thanks to an aging lineup and ket-fueled, government-destroying, Nazi-saluting CEO, Tesla sales are plummeting across the entire globe. Their revolutionary battery, and it goes on. Thanks to Musk's dogmatic, vision-only approach to self-driving Teslas, and think about this, folks. Does that sound like an independent journalist? Is that an independent journalist? No. That's a propagandist that claims to be an independent journalist. It's clear as day. Now, I don't know the guy. I've never met the guy, never talked to the guy. But the question I have for you is, when you see incongruence like that, does that make them more believable or less believable? It makes them less believable. The only people who will believe that Will Lockett guy are people who agree with his propaganda. That's it. That's it. Because people who do narrative flips, where they're like, we're for the environment, but then when Teslas are being blown up and caught on fire and wrecked and all these things on purpose destroyed, which destroys the environment, and they take a totally different tone, a completely new tone that flips the narrative. Do you really care about the fires and the environment? If these places are kindling, should you be using fire as your political tool? Probably not the wisest move. Okay. There's a few other incongruences I'm going to point out, with one, what I think is, kind of a fun one at the end, just because it doesn't really fit the rest of these so well. But I want to point out how incongruence or narrative flips destroy trust. Okay. Here, I'll put them up on the screen, and I'm going to go ahead and talk through it, which obviously will make it so I can't do great clips, but that's okay. There is a post of administrators in a school district, the Deerfield Middle School administrators, who actually blocked a door, reportedly. They barricaded girls in a locker room after they expressed their discomfort with undressing in front of a boy. So my guess is this is a trans issue, right? And this is really interesting to me, because when we think of administrators of a school, a public school, or a private school, what do we think? We think these are people who got into the profession to help children, to create growth and opportunity. And then they find that some of the kids are not comfortable with undressing. Well, let's be real, middle school, they're not probably comfortable undressing in front of others at all, let alone of somebody of a different gender. Now, some of you are going to probably be upset with me. You're going to be like, oh, you just misgendered somebody who thinks they're a woman. And because that's why they were let into the girls' locker room or whatever. Reality check, folks. If you got parts down there that are different than everybody around you, you're a different gender. And unfortunately, we had administrators who blocked the exit route for the kids to get out. So they had no choice but to be in there, either while they were forced to change, or the boy was forced to change because they couldn't get out either, or maybe they wanted to be in there and to change in front of the girls. I don't know. But the rest of them should not have had to deal with that. And here's the funny part from my perspective. It's incongruent. You get into a profession to grow people and you harm them. Look, as a therapist, we're taught the ethics: autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, justice, fidelity, and veracity. Non-maleficence means to do no harm. How would it have been harmful to just let the girls leave the locker room and let the boy change? You might say, well, then the boy would have been all alone. Okay. Well, you can't do that. You can't alienate one kid from all the rest. That's socially harmful. What if the kid alienates themselves? Because that is what's going on there. That's called incongruent, folks. That is not cool. Not cool at all. Okay, so we then take a look at a second situation. And most of you know who Elizabeth Warren is. Elizabeth Warren is one of our representatives. She's a U.S. senator. Well, Elizabeth Warren is one of the more incongruent senators that I've seen. And that's tough to say because there's a lot of incongruent senators. Let's be real. But I want to share with you something that she went ahead and posted. I'm pulling it up right now for those of you following along. The Constitution is clear. The president can't arrest people he disagrees with. And then she talks about detaining Mahmoud Khalil, a legal permanent resident, and all this stuff. And then she says, we must oppose this move toward authoritarianism. But stick with me, folks. Let's see what President Biden said about detaining somebody as the president of the United States. He was the president, and she supported him because she never came out against this, ever. And let's see what he says about detaining somebody you disagree with. And think narrative flip, folks. So you know he's going to talk about not doing that. You should never detain. You should never even consider arresting somebody you disagree with, right? That's about what's to come up here, I think. Let's take a listen.
I know this sounds bizarre. It sounds like if I said this 5 years ago, you'd lock me up. We got to lock him up.
Okay, so the president of the United States, Joe Biden, who was the president when he said this, he was actively the president. He was talking about locking up Donald Trump. Now, I don't look, lock up people who do illegal things and need to be locked up. Great, fine. But people that you disagree with, look, her own president, the one she supported, that she wanted, said, lock him up because he disagrees with us. And it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there at all. There are so many examples just like that. And we're going to show you a couple more incongruences that I think, deserve a moment of attention. How about this one? For those of you following along, you're going to see this. Vandalism, blowing up Teslas, hate crime, driving over an LGBTQ logo. That is what we would call incongruent. So whoever Insurrection Barbie is, I don't know who that is, but whoever she is, she's highlighting the incongruence. Okay. The next one. How about listen to this Columbia professor? That's my understanding. This was a Columbia professor. And see if you can spot any incongruence in this message. Any at all.
Revolution is always violent, but revolution is always driven by radical love.
Any incongruence that you see there, folks? Any at all? Did you hear him say, it is always violent and it is always driven by radical love? So, what he is suggesting, let's be real, if we're being congruent, here's what he would suggest. He would probably suggest that beating your spouse is showing love. He would probably suggest that if you love your community, you will go out and wreck it. Like Ralph, Wreck-It Ralph. Just go out there and just destroy, destroy, destroy. If he was being congruent, he's saying that if you really want to love deeply, you probably better carry an AR-15 down to your school and shoot it up. Is that absurd to you to hear those things? Because that's absurd to me. Why is it absurd? Because it's incongruent. That's not congruence at all. That's a distortion of monumental proportions. Lies, secrets, deceptions. And that's a professor at Columbia? No wonder Columbia is falling apart. Folks, congruence matters. Incongruence destroys trust. If my kid said I want to go to Columbia, my answer is going to be no. After seeing this kind of stuff, no. Now, I don't know. It could be going on where my kid's going to college right now. It's possible. It is possible. But if I found out about stuff like that, I would tell my kid to withdraw. I'd say you should not even be near any of that, because that is incongruence that is destructive. I do not trust that university at all, and I will not fund that university at all. And that was one professor. I don't know what else they've got going on there, but it's wild. Okay, so let's take a look at the next one. The next one is a gentleman named Carlos Alvarez Araños. What I want you to do is see if you can find any incongruence in this.
We are gathered here today not just to protest, but to demand action. Not just to speak, but to be heard. Not just to resist, but to win. Because sometimes the enemies are foreign, but sometimes they're domestic. We are here because Donald Trump has already done what we swore we would never allow. He has turned this country into a fascist dictatorship in all but name. He has corrupted.
What do you hear, folks? What do you hear? Okay, here's the irony. He's presenting him as a king. He's putting him on that pedestal. And I'm not a big Donald Trump fan, if I'm being honest. But stick with me for a second. He puts him on this pedestal of being the king. He calls him a fascist dictator. The incongruence? We are here not to do this, not to do this, but to win. To win? Is that really the objective? Because if that's the objective, who's fascist? I'm honestly, who is a fascist when it's all about winning and power? Who is the dictator if it's all about winning and power? Folks, that is a massive incongruence of monumental proportions. It's huge. That kind of incongruence makes somebody not believable at all. That I don't even know who that guy was, but he's not believable because he's incongruent. He is narrative flipping. Here's essentially what he's saying. I hate Donald Trump because he disagrees with him and his policy or whatever, right? I hate Donald Trump. And I or the people that I like should be in there doing what he's doing, winning. So he's saying he's a fascist, not Donald Trump. He's saying himself. He's a fascist and a dictator. He just doesn't like the fascist dictator that's in the office now. I mean, dude, figure that one out. Like, that's, if he were congruent, he would say, I don't like the fascist dictator that's there. I want to be, or I know the people that I want to be the fascist dictators. That would be congruent. And believe it or not, that would actually be more believable. Because when you contradict yourself with narrative flips or incongruence, you're not believable. Okay, I got one more. This one's fun. Hang with me. One more. This one's entertaining. So the next one is a lady who, I guess she is some kind of a representative. I'm gonna hopefully it'll tell me again. Okay, so she's a congressional candidate in Virginia, and this is the makings of an AR-15. Okay, what you're seeing on the screen for those of you following along. And what she is about to do is saw the end of the AR-15. This makes great podcasting, I'm sure. Okay, what did we see, folks? Here's the reason I think this one's actually kind of funny is she sawed off the barrel. When you saw off the barrel of the weapon, you don't go through the trigger housing area. You don't go through the trigger. You don't go through the bolt. When you go through the barrel, what are you doing on public displayed video? You're breaking the law. You cannot legally saw the barrel off of a rifle. You can't do that. So she's like, down with these weapons. I'm going to destroy one. And she saws off the barrel, which means you could buff out the end and it will still fire. It will still work. You have successfully just broken the law. That's it. And in your making of a point, you broke the law. That is what we call incongruence. It would have been much wiser to saw it off through the bolt and the trigger housing area, because then it would render it absolutely useless, completely useless. I thought that was good for just a little bit of humor before we wrap up here. So here's the summary I got for you, folks. Narrative flips and incongruence at the psychological level. So that's the individual level. That is the words, paraverbals, and nonverbals that don't align. So words and paraverbals. Paraverbals are your tone, volume, cadence. So it's like saying, I love you. I love you. I love you, right? They all sound super different, and they're actually sending different messages. Those are the paraverbals. Same words, different paraverbals. And your nonverbals. If you say words that don't align with your tone, volume, and cadence, in other words, if you say, I love you, people are not going to believe you because you're incongruent. So that's it at the psychological level. Sociological level, that's what you communicate privately doesn't align with what you communicate publicly. So if I say I am a calm and gentle person and I beat my children and my wife, I don't do that, just for the record. Wouldn't even dare to do that. I love my family. But let's say that I did. That would be incongruent. If I say, privately that I am, I believe in free speech, But then publicly, I'm out there telling people, you must silence others. That would be incongruent. So most of our politicians fall into this area. Cultural level, what we look at for narrative flips or incongruence, we would see anything that encourages division instead of unification within the national model. Okay. Now, through the world, that could be a little bit different. The world model might be anything that gives up sovereignty, right? So, if we're looking at, say, Ukraine and Russia right now, you might say the incongruence there is Russia invaded Ukraine. Fact, that's true. And now Ukraine is going to have to give up part of its land to Russia. Yes, probably also true. Okay. That's incongruent. There is a time at which that incongruence, we weigh the value of the loss and say, we don't believe Ukraine would say we're being wronged and we should not lose any of our land. Right. And yet they may get to a point where they say, okay, we're willing to sacrifice some of this, even though it goes against our interest, our best interest, and what we believe to be right, because at the global cultural level, it's better to sometimes stop a war than to continue to sustain a war like that, and just continue to lose people, lives. So I don't like it, but at the cultural level, sometimes you look at those things. So here's the deal. The takeaway for you is building trust is about truth, authenticity, and transparency, which means the tip of the day is your red flags. The tip of the day, incongruence destroys trust, truth, authenticity, and transparency. So if you're seeing incongruence, what you know is that's a red flag. Make a red flag of these incongruences, these narrative flips, and make sure you don't go back to trusting those people until they have reconciled it. They have shown a consistent pattern of doing it correctly. Correctly is not about right and wrong. It's about congruent. If I say I'm a mean person and I prove that I'm a mean person, you're going to believe me more. It doesn't mean that you're going to like me, but you're going to trust me. You're going to trust that I am consistent. Donald Trump said, I'm going to do these things when I'm in the office. He's doing them. The trust for Donald Trump is going up. It doesn't mean the likability. It doesn't mean you enjoy what he's doing, but the trust is going up. Why? He's doing what he said he was going to do. He is congruent. And congruence builds trust, not likability. Those are very, very different things, but it does build trust. Folks, I hope that this was useful and a little bit entertaining today. I took some time to try to make it a little more entertaining because I had a little bit of time to do that this morning. Please like, subscribe, share this with friends, follow us, all of those things, so that these things that we're doing here, trying to help people look at the culture, look at the social stuff, look at the individual psychological things. We're just trying to help people do a better job at life and whatever that means for them. Thank you for following us, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. We appreciate our audience a lot, so we give you some simple ways to track us down. Please like, subscribe, and follow all the podcasts on different platforms, but you can also email us at healthyperspectives@protonmail.com, or you can check out our website at healthy-perspectives.com/podcast. It's a backward slash. So if you want to go to our landing page, if you go to healthy-perspectives.com, you'll still find us. You just got to click on the podcast button. Thank you so much.